Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Ohel Zoom, Salvaging the Summer. It's July 1st, so there's certainly plenty of summer to discuss. And it's been a very busy time for everyone. We hope everyone is well. We hope everyone is safe. I am David Mandel, Chief Executive Officer of Ohel, and it's a real privilege to have the opportunity to have these conversations with you. I'd like to begin by thanking Sivi Ryder, Director at Ohel, for working on organizing the many TheraZooms that Ohel has hosted over the past 3 months. And this evening, Cheryl Chernovsky, who joins us, who's worked behind the scenes to organize many of the TheraZooms, including this evening. Let me welcome Dr. N Blumenthal, Director at Ohel of Ohel's Trauma Work and Bereavement. And certainly, Dr. Blumenthal has been unusually busy these last 4 months, as I'm sure everyone has been in your own individual circumstances. Dr. Mark Kirschenbaum, a well-known popular pediatrician with a practice in both Borough Park and Williamsburg, and medical consultant to Ohel, and Racheli Gross, also known as Corona Mora, who has been very involved with hundreds of families providing educational, recreational, and social guidance these last 4 months. Our purpose this evening is to provide information and guidance for individuals who are facing dilemmas, how to handle family situations with children, and still make some difficult choices in the summertime. We're going to be asking Dr. Blumenthal to open with his comments, followed by Dr. Kirschenbaum with his comments, and then Ms. Gross, and then we have questions that have been submitted to us in advance, which we will present and discuss with you. As you are listening, if any thoughts, questions come to your mind, please email your questions to coping with COVID-19 at ohelfamily.org. Coping with COVID-19 at ohelfamily.org. With that, let me introduce Dr. N Blumenthal, Director of Trauma, Grief, and Bereavement at Ohel Children's Home and Family Services. Dr. Blumenthal.
Hi, good evening, everybody. And let me echo what David just said, is that we hope everybody is well and that those who have been sick are in the midst of a full recovery. David's introduction very much reminds me of the comedian who said he's going to rewrite his autobiography to include himself. So he thanked many of the people involved in organizing thousands, but he also deserves a thank you for all his efforts, as well as our presidium in Ohel, Mel Zachter and Jay Kestenbaum, the entire board who makes this possible, that we can provide this service to the community. And it seems at last count now we have, I think roughly about 60 people here. So that's very important on this very timely, difficult subject. It's also a great privilege to share the podium, or it is a podium, with Dr. Kirschenbaum, who I've just recently gotten to hear from, and as you'll hear shortly, presents in a very knowledgeable, scientific, and relevant manner in terms of the medical and health concerns. And a Corona Mora, who's now transitioning to become a Corona Madricha, or a Corona counselor, who's a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about in terms of concepts of what to be done will be brought down to earth and made much more pragmatic by her very creative but hands-on types of solutions. So what I thought I'd like to do today, last time actually we presented on this, which was I think about a week ago, people were still in the throes of trying to decide what to do. It's my impression now that people are narrowing it down, have a pretty good idea what they're going to be doing this summer, whether it's going to be some sort of modified sleep-away camp, regular sleepaway camp, where they go to camp and they sleep somewhere else, or they stay up all night, so it's not sleepaway camp. I don't know exactly, but all sorts of modifications, Zoom camp, not Zoom camp, half-day camp, not half-day camp, round-robin camp. I mean, everybody's, as has been the case with since this began, being very creative and imaginative to try to make for a summer, or at least to replicate the type of summer that in the past we had taken for granted. So I thought what I'd like to do now is just focus on what's the function of summer vacation, what's the function of camp, and in just a few minutes identify those functions and then see in a more conceptual way how we can at least get some or not all of those benefits. And then again, as I said, in terms of how to do that while negotiating health concerns will be addressed, and of course more pragmatic ways will be given as well. So first of all, let's start with a premise that has to be emphasized. Summer vacation and camps are not just a luxury. It's not because we've become terribly spoiled and it's some sort of great indulgence. And I'm not going to say it's life and death. And in fact, there are certain children who don't take kindly to camp or super camp, and they're very normal, well-adjusted children. They just don't like having daddy long legs crawling around in their beds, or don't like the structure of camp. And they do well without camp. But most kids do want the camp experience and certainly need that summertime or that time away from the regimentation and structure of their academic year. So it is important. And it serves a very important function. And if nothing else, sometimes I marvel at the fact of what children look like at the end of the academic year and what they look like when they come back from camp. Makes us wonder what we do to them all year, but they look so healthy. And, you know, they have color and they've grown, and it's really more amazing what the summer can do. In fact, it's a little different, but for many years I joined the Kids of Courage trips, where they would take like an 8 to 10 day vacation. These are children that are medically compromised. And the actual flight to health that we would see, just being among their peers and having that kind of carefree recreation, was just simply amazing to watch. So it's pretty important. And I think that's why we're meeting and why we're trying to see what we can capture and how much we can salvage, as the title says, from those necessities in terms of the summer. So let me identify what I think are some of the important accomplishments and necessities of the summer vacation for our children and to some extent for ourselves. First of all, for our children, the independence. If they go to sleepaway camp, they're away from us and they have to attend to their needs. I mean, obviously the camp takes care of them, feeds them, not like cooking their own meals, etc. But they have to make many decisions and they have to solve sometimes challenges and problems without the immediate presence of parents, or for that matter, teachers or adults. So it does engender a certain independence, and that really is important in terms of what I often refer to as the paradox of childhood, which is that, you know, usually we have something precious. If we have an heirloom, if we have a very precious item, we lock it up in a safe, we try to hold on to it, we try to pass it on to our descendants, and yet there's nothing more precious to us than our children. But if we do our job right, they leave us. Our goal is that we want them to become independent adults, and it's tragic when they can't. So it's part of, that's a paradox of childhood, and therefore, in fact, that's where, in many respects, where Ohel is so important in terms of the housing that it provides for adults with disabilities, giving them that sense of independence and the capacity to move away from their home. So this is engendered, and to a large extent, that whole process is accelerated by the experience of being away from the adults and being in a camp setting. And then also, especially for the adolescent children and or middle school age children, there's a very healthy shift to the peer group. The younger child has a primary focus on the family, the immediate family, and the teen naturally shifts that focus away from the family to the peer culture, to the peer group. And that's, you know, and we've all, I think any of us who've raised adolescents have witnessed this, how suddenly the friends or even the young counselor becomes so much more important than you. And you want that, because again, there's that shift away from the emphasis on the family to the shift to the peer group, which and it facilitates this moving away. And that miraculous event where we pick from our peer culture one person is going to be the closest family member we ever have, i.e. a spouse. So again, being surrounded by peers and spending your day in a very carefree, fun setting, surrounded by peers, is part of that whole shift. And again, those of us older people, if we think back on our friendships we made there, they're very, very important. As I mentioned earlier, just being in the fresh air, the opportunity for athletic pursuits, these are necessary as well, especially for our children who have very long academic days, and even when the day's over, often have a lot of homework, and we are, as a community, tend to be very academically focused. And this is a chance, of course, they have gym and they play some ball, but to have a day where there's so much swimming and ball playing and walking and hiking and just being in the surroundings of a country setting is healthy and also necessary, and then becomes part of their repertoire. And I'm sure for many people who as adults, who see to it that they're physically fit, that go to the gym, that walk, that jog, etc. Some of that may be based on those early experiences in camp where they felt the benefits of that surrounding. There's what we refer to as the ruach, the spirit of camp. And I'm sure, again, many of us, when we think back to camp, Shabbos in camp or Shabbat in camp was just, you can't replicate that. The singing, the communal prayers, even the Tisha B'Av, and how it's commemorated as an entire community with no outside interruptions, with no distractions, and how it can permeate your consciousness. I remember the first time after many years of being in camp, of being home for a Tisha B'Av, and I was just, I couldn't take it. It was just so part compared to how we commemorate in camp. So that's an important part of a camp experience also, and again, very much shapes us as spiritual people. And then it's good to get away from parents in school, not only because parents can be annoying and school can be difficult, but sometimes when you go away from something and you come back to it, you have a fresh perspective. And that's sometimes facilitated again by that time away. Now, again, those people are able to go to camp and are able to have that summer vacation that they've had in the past, and then they'll have these benefits. What about many of us, and I think a good number, where they're not going to have that, or they're going to have it in some very compromised kind of way? So first of all, let's not dupe ourselves. Let's not play games. Reality is very important. I remember early in my career when I was working with substance abusers, sometimes they used to say that reality is for people who can't handle drugs. I'm not suggesting that, but reality is important, and acknowledging and validating it is important. And for those children who are not going to have the kind of summer that they've come to expect or they've gotten used to, acknowledging that is important, and trying to convince them that this is going to be just as good a summer as any other summer is tampering with their sense of reality, and that nobody likes that. So we have to first, accept it but let them know and tell them very specifically, we're going to try to capture as much of those benefits in that time as we can. So first of all, let me give you some suggestions. One of the things you should do over the summer, if your child is not, again, in that typical camp setting, is try to give them more control and leverage over their lives, because again, that's part of the independence that's nurtured while they're in camp. So let them have some say about important things like bedtime and meals and activities. Discuss it with them, give them choices, let them frame their time. Now, even in camp, you don't have total control, but give them more control than you would, especially during the school year, which is so demanding. And you don't have the choice of what time you get up, and you don't have the choice of not doing homework or not studying for tests. But here, let's see if you can give them, again, with limitations, and it's not like totally carefree, they can't just do whatever they want. That's not reality either, but we give them a time where they make choices, and then they point out the consequences of their choices. Nurture and within them that sense of independence, of control, greater control over their lives, and what the consequences are as well. Work into your day, and whatever the day is, a time for reflection, a time to just think. Again, something you can't necessarily do during the year. And as I indicated earlier, one of the benefits of camp is getting away and coming back and seeing things from a different perspective. So try to weave into the day times that can they reflect on their life, reflect on school, reflect on what's going on around them, and try to get a renewed or a different or altered perspective on aspects of their lives. Carefree schmoozing, which again is so much part of the camp, walking back and forth to your bunk and during downtime, and of course when lights out and when you're all talking and joking, and there's room for that. And again, not much time to do that during the academic year. So sit and give them, schmooze, take walks, sit in the backyard and just have carefree conversations without a particular direction. there's also an opportunity they have in the summer that we can try to capture, even if they're home. It's a good time for creativity. I don't want to, again, be mazik vul and encroach upon Asperger's territory as an educator, but so much of education is, what we call convergent thinking, is coming to an answer. When you have a test, there is an answer. Now, sometimes there's creative parts of education, certainly creative writing and literature, etc. But a big chunk of it is just mastering facts and information. So the summer might be a very nice time for just creativity, to address issues that don't have like these kind of very specific pointed answers, and the chance to just think more independently. Now, a big question we get asked a lot is, what if a child is behind in certain academic skills, or especially this year when so much of school is missed? Should we use the summer to try to catch up with those skills? And it's a judgment call. It's hard. But I think if it certainly shouldn't be a significant part of the day. You want to get them away from school. But if for a certain part of the day, if you want to use it to help them catch up, and certainly those kind of skills that I would think are where one year is dependent upon the other, such as mathematics, you can do it, but contained, and try to make it, if you will, less tense and carefree than it would be during the year. And I'm not sure if it becomes a battle royale. It may not even be worth it. But also, by the way, it's a wonderful opportunity, which again, our children have so little opportunities to learn new skills. This kind of skills that if they didn't have that very long academic day, they might have. Musical instruments, woodworking, art, maybe different types of visual spatial skills, or certain types of maybe programming on the computer, something that's semi-recreational, but a life skill or a hobby that can stay with them. And that, again, with our even certain athletic accomplishments, again, playing sports with other kids, whether we can or can't, again, I'll leave it Dr. Kirschenbaum to decide about that. But even if it's a matter of, again, if social distancing and health precautions are preserved, to develop and refine certain athletic skills. Let them get away a little bit, if we can. Again, we may be contained, but if they can just explore areas, get to the country a little bit, get outside a bit more, that's also part of it. New events, new exposure, which again, school is redundant. School is the same classroom, the same teacher, day in and day out. And camp is such a change, or the summer is just, and even with trips, to see new things, see different parts as much as you can of at least your immediate surroundings. Certainly, I doubt we'll be able to get around and do much travel to great distances, but again, new events, new schools, new experiences. Now, a big chunk of the summer is time for yourselves as parents, and that's going to be very hard when you're running a sort of semi-camp at home. And I doubt we'll have as much time to relax ourselves as parents and be away from the child, have those same benefits about being away. But I will tell you that if you structure the day, if you have activities, when the day is over, you'll have more time. But if it's not a very exciting or interesting or structured day, your kids are going to be surrounding you and hounding you at night. So that's going to be, paradoxically, the more organized you are and the more you expose them, the more you probably will have time for yourself. And then one last point, and with that I will conclude. There's a very important lesson that can be learned now. We've lived in very charmed times. Our recent years, there have been some difficulties, but things have pretty much gone our way. We've grown enormously. We've mushroomed as a community. With the advent of technology has allowed us to do things, exposed to different types of entertainment and world exposure that was never possible before. And we've lived in a time of relative opulence, and we've been able to take our children on nice vacations and let them have that rich summer with camp or teen travel or all that we sometimes are able to give them. And so we're not very used to the word no. We're not used to deprivation. And this summer, if it is a compromised summer, and if it is a summer that is not totally fulfilling, it might be a wonderful opportunity to teach our children that can be part of life. And how do you handle it? What do you do when there are setbacks? What do you do when things don't go your way? What do you do if there's an economic setback? If there's for whatever host of opportunities, if there's an illness or whatever, how do we handle disappointment? How do we handle those stumbling blocks? And we can model this for them. We certainly hope and pray that our children will have only charmed lives. But reality is that there may be hardships. That's the way the world is. I once heard a story that somebody was paying a shiv visit to Rav Yaakov Kaneski, I think when one of his siblings died. And when he left, he said, you should only have smachos, you should only have happy occasions. And he said, you're wishing me dead. There's no such thing. Life is a mixed bag. And so therefore, I think it's a good opportunity to train our children how we deal with life setbacks and how we deal with these kind of situations when there are stumbling blocks and when we don't get everything we want, and demonstrate that for them and model it for them, and that in the future, when they'll have different types of setbacks, they'll have the wherewithal to handle it. I'll conclude with a story I once heard about the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim, of course, his yeshiva was in Radin, and during World War I, Radin was like literally destroyed. And Hayas, the American philanthropic organization, after World War I, gave financial stipends to European communities that were devastated during World War I, and Radin itself received regular financial stipends. There probably wasn't a huge amount of money, but I guess when the dollar got translated into zlotin or whatever, it was a significant part of the yeshiva's budget. When the 29 crash came, they weren't able to do them. They didn't have the financial wherewithal, and they wrote to the communities, including Radin, that they can't provide this kind of financial support. And again, the Chafetz Chaim then was well in his 90s, and they tried to hide it from him. They didn't want to upset him, but sooner or later was unable to do so because it was impinging upon the budget. So they told him finally, and he quickly said, get me a pen, get me paper, get me their address. I have to write them a letter. And everybody thought he was going to write to them and beg them to continue to provide the stipend, but he didn't. He wrote a letter and he thanked them for all the support they had given for all those years. And again, we're certainly hoping, I think we can fully anticipate that the setback we're experiencing now is a temporary one, but sometimes we have to just accept it, be grateful for the years and the wonderful summers we've had and the opportunities we've had to give our children that kind of recreation. But this year, it may not be available or as available as it has in the past. And that's a skill and a capacity to tolerate that I think we could all benefit from learning how to manage. Okay, at this point, I'll hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blumenthal. We're discussing the summer, and Dr. Blumenthal gave several, if we could put it under the heading of psychological comments. Dr. Mark Kirschenbaum will give his perspective on a medical view, and Racheli will give a perspective on educational, recreational view. I remind those who want to submit your questions to email to copingwithcovid19@ohelfamily.org, copingwithcovid19@ohelfamily.org. Some of the points that I took, important points from Dr. Blumenthal's comments, is that camp offers independence to children, an opportunity for them to have problem-solving situations, helps develop peer relationships for children. At times parents feel that kids can be annoying. Well, Dr. Blumenthal commented that kids feel that parents can be annoying too. And having some separation between parents and children is good. If kids are home, it gives them the opportunity to have more choices. Parents should give kids the opportunity to have more choices, more control over their life. And finally, if you are having your child at home in the summertime at day camp, and especially if he's home, she's home without a day camp, Dr. Blumenthal encourages that the day needs structure. With that, let me introduce Dr. Mark Kirschenbaum, a pediatrician and Ohel medical consultant. Dr. Kirschenbaum, thank you for joining.
You got it. Thank you very much for having me, Dr. Blumenthal. Those were some fantastic opening remarks. As I'm listening to you, I'm trying to take to heart some of the points that you made, because I do feel that if we can internalize some of what you've mentioned, we'll make the summer go by a lot quicker, and we can actually have some growth that we can see in our home. To start regarding the medical aspect of COVID-19, the current state of affairs with this deadly virus. So not much has changed in the last week in the sense of what's happening locally in New York. It is still very much around. We are having new cases, in the tri-state area. The cases that are coming up, they aren't as deadly as they were 3.5 months ago when this virus started. More troubling is what we're seeing in other states. There's this second wave or a first wave that it's an extension of the first wave in states like Arizona, Florida, Texas. And they are getting overwhelmed. Their ICUs are full over there, and their supplies are going down, and ICU beds are full. So we are certainly seeing it still in the States, in the United States, and in some states. And it's very difficult for the medical community at this very moment to give a clear answer about why it's happening to certain states, and why are certain states like New York, where we're having protests in the streets and demonstrations with thousands of people communally getting together in close conditions, and we're not really seeing that second wave that we've all been expecting, thankfully. Baruch Hashem, and I'm glad to say that we're not seeing it. What's concerning to me is that I can't explain it. When I say I am referring to the medical community, we can't explain why it hasn't hit in New York in particular. There is a fear that it still may come, for sure. But this is my opinion. At this very moment, sort of what we were talking about last week, to me, it's all about risk stratification, in the sense of how bad, how much of a concern is there for coronavirus for your children and yourself in particular, for your immediate family members, weighing that against some of the things that Dr. Blumenthal just mentioned and David just mentioned regarding the critical nature of development that takes place over the summer months. Those months, as a pediatrician, those months you literally see it before your very eyes. June, you do well visits. You do well visits in September. As a pediatrician, the kids look differently. They just look different before camp and after camp. During those summer months, the development that I'd say anyone from the age of 6 to 16, those are the years that we see that growth over a 10-week summer. The 3 weeks before camp, the structure, the non-structured structure of camp, and then the couple weeks after camp to school is so important. So it's incumbent upon all of us to weigh out those benefits that we see against the health risks of being around other children in communal setting. That's a decision that each parent has to make on their own. I can just tell you that from the medical standpoint, the risk appears to be less than it's been in the past. And it seems to me that at this point, the advantages for children, for their development, to be in a responsible setting supersedes the risks of coronavirus for a not compromised family, because we are a unit. So we have to make sure that no one in the family has conditions that would make them put them at a higher risk group. That would be my coronavirus update. That there's a lot that we don't know. I've been saying that for the last 3.5 months. I'm getting tired of saying that I don't know. But overall, it seems to be it is improving. Now, just to address a little bit of this idea of the unknown, the last week has been particularly trying on a lot of parents, for sure. I'm hearing about it in the office constantly, and personally as well. I have 2 daughters that were supposed to go to camp. One's sleepaway camp. One sleepaway camp turned to day camp. The other one's staying a local day camp. So everyone's plans have changed, and every day there seems to have been new updates and new emails and new WhatsApp updates that have been going around to the parents, and it's been really, really, really trying on the parents. But who it's been even more trying on are the children. They are certainly paying the price for this rapid change. Now, as adults, and especially as someone who's being asked these questions, I believe that the leadership is trying their hardest to give reasonable answers in a reasonable amount of time, but the children are having a hard time understanding why the adults are changing their minds all the time. It's really throwing them off. They've been looking forward to this last 3.5 months. Even the name of tonight's Star Zoom of Salvaging Summer, just I don't know, it's just the mere name of it. It's like, ugh, salvaging summer. Because I know as children, and especially as parents of young children, we look forward to these months with such excitement. And the amount of disappointment that these kids have gone through in the last 2 weeks alone has been dramatic, to say the least. In my experience, with disappointment, many times comes with anxiety. It's so important for parents, even though we may feel at times that we have no control over what's going on and the back and forth of what are we going to do and where are we going to do. It's important that we invite our children, the older ones, especially the preteens and teens, to involve them in the decision making. But that fear that you have, and the pit in your stomach or the knot in your stomach you have about what you can do with your children for the next 10 weeks, it's important that we discuss that with spouses if we can, other adults that we trust and that we talk to, and that when we're around our children, they shouldn't feed off of our anxieties about what we're going to do with the children. I'm seeing it in the office on a daily basis right now. This past week's been very trying for the parents. As much as we can, if we can try to limit the amount that the children are hearing, the minute-by-minute updates. Still this week, I'd say over the next week or two, we're still going to be dealing with this where things are still changing at a rapid rate. So I'd encourage everyone to sort of, as best as they can, come up with a reasonable solution to the summer and then roll it out for the children, hear what they have to say, adjust to what they say, and we sort of meet somewhere in the middle. But the back and forth isn't doing anyone any good at this very moment. Regarding getting into a schedule, we are certainly seeing, I'm seeing that for some, I'd say mostly it's the teens, the waking up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, going to sleep 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on a daily basis. It's not good for anybody. So over the course of the summer, as best as possible, to have, like sort of what Dr. Blumenthal was saying, structured environment is really important, because we still want these kids to have a good time, and we know that they will fade and they're going to tire out if they have an unstructured time, waking up in the middle of the afternoon. I don't really have, unfortunately, I wish I had more information regarding coronavirus, some more substantial information. I just want to, someone mentioned to me about something I mentioned last week, and I want to reiterate it because she was saying to me that it mattered and it helped her a lot. Each camp at this point, whether it's a day camp or a sleepaway camp, are having different protocols in place for what they're trying to do. Antibodies, nasal swabs, instant tests. As a doctor, I'm not sure about the validity that gives me, or the comfort level that gives me regarding the ability to spread disease, or for a child to bring it home at the end of camp. There's so much that we don't know, but it's important that the camp does have a plan in place, and as parents, we follow it to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirschenbaum. Dr. Kirschenbaum mentioned the term risk stratification at the outset of his comments. Risk stratification is a concept for parents to look at the risk-reward opportunities of sending your child to camp. Of course, no one is giving medical advice tonight to parents as to what they should do with their own children. That is up to you as a parent, and up to you to consult with your physician. Dr. Kirschenbaum mentioned the risk stratification concept involves, for example, the growth and development for 6 to 16-year-olds, the opportunities for them, the benefits and risks of sending a child to summer camp. Dr. Kirschenbaum mentioned that the opportunities are greater than the risk, certainly for those individuals that are non-medically compromised. Monitor your child's development. The summertime is a very important opportunity that they excitedly look for. Any individual at any age that went to camp as a child on this or any other call vividly remembers their camp experiences 10, 20, 30, many years later. Our children and grandchildren are in those situations right now where they want to look back at this summer and have wonderful memories rather than canceled memories. And take a look at the structure, emphasizing as an example what Dr. Blumenthal spoke about. Dr. Kirschenbaum gave the example of sleep time, wake-up time, to have some structure in the day. Situations in the summertime that we think may only last 2, 4, 6 weeks, for a child in a high development stage, at a 10-year-old or 12-year-old, they can have long-lasting effects. It's my pleasure to introduce Racheli Gross. Ms. Gross has been helping and providing support to thousands of homeschooling parents since the beginning of COVID back in mid-March, and has become known as Corona Mora. With that, thank you for joining us, Ms. Gross.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Blumenthal. Thank you, Dr. Kirschenbaum. I couldn't help but make a parallel while the two of you were speaking to just to give everybody a little background. I am an elementary school principal, and this Corona Mora gig just happened on March 14th when I thought, how can I give back to the community? And on a whim created this Instagram account, and now we are a learning community of 5,000 families that are trying to stay afloat and support one another with creative ideas. And my job primarily is a elementary school principal. And now that we're trying to develop a reopening plan, we have developed this pie chart of the 3 domains that every decision that we make is going to have to run through these 3 domains. And that check that we're doing is continuity of learning and engagement, health and safety, and of course, mental health and social emotional stability. And I feel like the 3 of us tonight kind of represent that pie chart that we created in our reentry plans and what we're trying to, design as we move into the fall. But tonight we're here to talk about summer. And when I think about summer vacation, and I think about, what parents are up against in terms of, camps canceling or families not feeling comfortable sending to camps, or if you have a family member in your unit, like Dr. Kirschenbaum mentioned, that is immunocompromised, or, for the, protection of the family, the child can't go to camp. We are now kind of having, as adults, a little PTSD to mid-March when the schools closed and there was this feeling of hopelessness and what am I going to do? So I kind of have to go back to my speaking engagements in the middle of March as to, the foundation of making sure that the students and the children stay engaged at home, and the structure is really about open communication and establishing norms and protocols for your family. So whether you are a highly structured family that needs an hour-by-hour schedule, or you are more of a relaxed, free-form family, you have to define that. And what I mean is, in September, teachers spend the entire month establishing rules, protocols, norms. Usually teachers gather the children on the carpet and create some sort of class constitution where the children give feedback what they think would be appropriate rules. And like Dr. Blumenthal had mentioned, that kind of gives the children the opportunity to give input on what they think a good day would look like for summer without camp. So definitions are very, very big. What do I mean by that? If you're going to establish, afternoon is free play while mommy or daddy are on the computer because they're still working from home, you have to define what free play is. Because if in your head free play means only using the board games, but little Shmuley thinks that it means making slime on his own, that's already going to cause conflict at home. So defining what is involved in each category, activities that require parent supervision, activities that children are allowed to do by themselves. Just having those conversations to make sure that you establish those norms will, I think, reduce family aggravation a whole lot. And I've gotten a lot of feedback that in mid-March, when the families were putting together their schedules, that was very helpful. So the same thing with establishing screen time, how much, what activities they're allowed to do outside, all of that. Again, every family will decide for themselves what's right, but as long as you have those open conversations, and there's no shame in signage. You walk into a classroom, there are signs everywhere, right? Rules to do this, stand here, lists of books to do, what to do when you're finished with your schoolwork. So if the students, it's, obviously established that that's important for children to see that all the time, there's no shame in hanging up signs in the playroom of what's an independent activity, what's an activity that needs parent supervision. again, also with the playtime, I'm sure, Dr. Kirschenbaum, I would hope you would support me on this one, is that families have to decide playing with neighbors, inside play, outside play, friends coming over, having those clear conversations with your children, especially if you have a family member that you're trying to protect, where the neighbors are having friends come in and out of the house. You have to have those open and honest conversations and set those boundaries and norms early for your family, because you don't want to have conflict and arguing daily. Well, why can't the neighbor come over, or why can't I go into his house? Now, in terms of practical activities, adventures, not every day has to be the favorite day of camp, color war with, from sunrise to sunset. If you want to think about it, that each day can have something special. And it could be baking brownies from a box. It could be kids cooking dinner. It could be a craft. It could be a project that you do. It doesn't have to be a full day of really exciting things. One thing a day that the kids can actually put their head at night on the pillow and say, wow, that was a really fun activity. First of all, it will keep things fresh, and it will also keep you sane. And like Dr. Blumenthal said before, it's such a great opportunity to learn new skills. So think about long-term skills. You have 2 months now. Has your child ever thought about taking up knitting? Coding, I know Dr. Blumenthal suggested before. Learning magic tricks. That's a really big one. And then you can always think about having a magic show at the end of the year. A gymnastics move that the kids have always been trying to master but never had the opportunity. Think back to your camp experience, lanyard. Why did they give us lanyard? Because it took time. So any of these routine kind of over and over again skills that the kids can actually own is really beneficial. And also have the conversation with your child. What do you want to learn this summer? Because, if you look at that zone of proximal development, is that, if there's interest, then you can actually have increased engagement and actually push the child further. So if the child says, I always wanted to learn how to knit a scarf. Well, now you've now piqued their interest, and now they're going to be much more interested to stick with it. Planting is also a really popular activity because you can see progress. And, fortunate or unfortunately, we have the gift of time here. We have 2 months to see something go from a seed to a plant. Think about night activity. So maybe you're working from home and you can't do activities during the day. So now think about, what can we do at night? Is it family movie night? Is it a family bike ride? Is it going to look at stars outside? Is it a fun dinner where you're having a salad bar or an ice cream bar? Think about ways that you could make the evenings exciting if the days aren't going to be as spectacular as you would hope. And also, branding is important. You're going to be doing bath time and nail cutting anyway, right? So if you put a bathrobe on and call it spa night, perhaps now you've created something more exciting and you have less of an argument about getting the task done. And I also think that there's an opportunity here to celebrate a little nostalgia. I personally never went to camp. It wasn't in my family's budget. I played a lot outside. We're talking sprinklers, inflatable pools, frisbees, anything we could get our hands on. And maybe now we can kind of have that conversation with the kids and say, now is an opportunity to kind of kick it old school a little bit, enjoy more fresh air, take those long walks, those bike rides, but a couple of things to make some of the unstructured time a little bit more, I would say, successful. Invest, if you have a young child and they don't have one already, a digital watch, because you want to be able to say at 3:20, I need you back at home, and give them that independence to be able to control their own schedule. Just following the sun and, come home when the sun goes down. Unfortunately, that's not good anymore. I know that this was very successful for a lot of parents, is have children choose their snacks for the day. So have them go into the pantry, they have a basket with their name on it, whatever the number of snacks that you think is appropriate, so that they're not constantly saying, I need a snack, I'm hungry. They know that they have what they selected for the day, and then they can kind of ration it for themselves and give that more independence. Label those water bottles so that you're not constantly cleaning cups up from around the house. And then in terms of summer learning, your child, where those gaps are. I keep saying, I know my staff, my teachers are my superheroes. They will pick up where we left off. They will fill those gaps. They will catch the kids up. We know that 3rd grade is not going to look like 3rd grade. Typically, we know we're going to have to, backpedal a little bit. So I wouldn't put that much pressure on the academics. Let the kids be kids. And just another suggestion that also came up, if you are concerned about davening or reading, There are a lot of teens that had their summers plans get canceled. There are a lot of teens that are probably looking for some structure themselves. Reach out to, some of your neighbors, hire a counselor to maybe do morning davening or do a novel read aloud, even if it's over Zoom and you're not comfortable with them doing it in person. That can really benefit the teens and the little ones. And for really, daily updates and practical ideas, I post everything on my Instagram account on Corona Mora, and now coronamora.com has been transformed into Camp Corona Mora, where you can find night activity ideas, links to recipes, crafts, concerts for night activity, and some family-friendly movies for family night.
Thank you very much. It's everyone's responsibility on this call to get Corona Mora over to a sleepaway camp. So she has that opportunity in her life. Some very practical suggestions. Screen time. Racheli Gross spoke about supervised versus unsupervised activities for your children at home on screen time. One good activity, she talked about thinking strategic. There's 6 to 8 weeks in the summertime, and a strategic thought that she shared is one good activity per day may be sufficient. And ask your child, you've got wonderful ideas as a parent, what your child would want to do. She suggested that you ask your child, what would you like to do? What would you consider fun? What would you consider a learning opportunity? Art, music, gymnastics, riding a bike, whatever it is, and try to blend those decisions together. Let's go to questions that people have been asking. I'd like to start with Dr. Blumenthal and Dr. Kirschenbaum. Question was asked that we have an immunocompromised family, and we would like to send our child to camp. Dr. Kirschenbaum, we would like to send our child to camp, but we're concerned. He would like to go to camp. She would like to go to camp, but we're concerned because we have a situation in our house is immunocompromised. Then, Dr. Blumenthal, I want to pose the opposite question to you, that we want our child to go to camp, but our son, our daughter is afraid to go. They're highly anxious. How do we encourage them that it is okay for them to go to camp without that?
They did a lot of damage today.
Dr. Kirschenbaum, you first, please.
So just to clarify, so your question for me is whether or not someone should go to sleepaway camp if they have a sibling with immunocompromised condition, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So officially, I recommend to everyone talk to their private doctor, whoever it may be, and ask them this all-important question. In the news, over the last bunch of months, there's been a lot of conversation regarding immunocompromise. As a doctor, no two immunocompromised patients are the same. They never are. Some people are on the way up. Some people are on the way down. Some people, there's a lot of confusion regarding the treatment plan. And now with coronavirus in particular, different immunocompromised people are being affected differently. And it's complicated to know exactly what those risks are. So it's incumbent upon all of us to ask either the specialist taking care of the patient or the primary care doctor. I can only tell you what I've been telling other folks in my practice who they're asking me what they should do. And rarely am I telling them that the siblings should not go to camp. For the most part, I've been telling everyone that it is safe to go. Now, in the beginning of coronavirus, we thought things such as diseases such as asthma or diabetes. I'm a pediatrician, so I deal predominantly with type 1 diabetes, were enough of a risk that put you in the high-risk group that to get coronavirus. If you do get coronavirus, you get very sick from it. What we've seen in the last 3.5 months is that it's not necessarily true, that children, generally speaking, have been doing well, even those affected by coronavirus. Obviously, there's unique circumstances all the time. We just found out that New York State updated the numbers on that disease that we talked a little bit about last week, the PIMS, the Kawasaki-like disease found post-coronavirus after you've gotten over it. The numbers have recently been put out again where the numbers may have been a little higher than, the numbers indeed are lower than what they reported a little while back, so which is reassuring. So that should just give more reassurance to parents that regarding their children themselves are safe, and depending on the unique immunocompromised state of the child, what I've been recommending parents is that it's fine.
Dr. Blumenthal, in the opposite direction, we are encouraging our child to go to camp, but he or she really does not want to go. They've heard so much. All these words are scaring my 11-year-old. She doesn't want to go to camp. How do I encourage them that it is okay to go to camp?
Okay, so first of all, I think it depends on the level of fear. If the kid is really dreading it and there's like pronounced anxiety, kind of forcing the kid to go can just make it worse. If they go and they have a panic attack or panic reaction, they'll even be more afraid of camp. If there's an moderate level of trepidation, the paradox with anxiety and fear is that you have to be in the fearful situation to overcome it. But then I think coaxing the child to go, assuring them that if after a certain period of time they're still not feeling comfortable that they can come home, might do the trick, because then once they get there and they see that everything's okay, they'll overcome that fear. And by the way, also, as I mentioned earlier, camp is not for everybody, and it's not a sign of something wrong with the child. We're different, and some people are not campers by nature. The other thing that I think that's very important is that first and foremost, and this applies to all cases of anxiety, first make sure you yourself are in a comfortable place, that you're not anxious. You're not sending your child to camp with trepidation, but doing it because everybody else is. Because children have radar, and they will sense your hesitation and fear. So first, make sure you're clear yourself, that you feel confident. There's no such thing as 100% guarantees, but that you feel good, you feel confident, you spoke to your physician, as Dr. Kirschenbaum said, and then process it with your child.
Ms. Gross, since we're Zooming tonight, let's talk about a Zoom camp. A question was asked on the benefits. My neighborhood for my child is not having a camp, a physical camp. They're having only a Zoom camp. So the question is a Zoom camp better than no camp at all? And since all three of you mentioned social relationships that develop in camp, if I choose a Zoom camp for my son or daughter, how do they develop social relationships in a Zoom camp?
Well, I think the benefit right now that we all have is, knowledge is power. You know your child best, and they just experienced 3.5 months of distance learning. I know that my school has 400 children. My teachers have been reporting that some students have been thriving and growing more than they ever have via distance learning, and some have been struggling, and usually in typical classrooms, they soar. So if you see that your child is able to attend, is excited to go on Zoom, is eager to join activities, then I say all the power to you in signing your child up. But if you've seen that the child, through their class and their teacher, struggled and experienced Zoom fatigue, and you had to argue with them to join, then you have to kind of make that, I think, assessment for you and your own family and your own child. In terms of social interactions, it all depends on where you feel comfortable. It depends on if you are okay with social distancing play dates, or if you prefer still going on a digital, modality or method. Facebook Messenger, is very popular for the virtual play dates. FaceTime and house party as well, obviously with parent supervision. But if you are comfortable with social distancing play dates, I'm sure there is a healthy way that you have to facilitate that. It might be a little bit more pre-planned and organized, but there still is a possibility if you do have a group of families that you can reach out to.
A few more questions and then we'll wrap up. Dr. Kirschenbaum, my 10-year-old is going to day camp. Every day they're going on a bus with 40 other children. They're spending the day in day camp, wherever that may be, and then they're coming home. Could his grandmother visit? Could my elderly parent visit in the house, since on a daily basis they're going on a bus and exposed to different children, different adults, different circumstances? What's the safety issue involved?
So You asked me a similar question last week. It's such a difficult question, really hard to answer. What I've been telling everyone, and this is not fact, there is no fact, it's COVID-19. It's we're chasing our tail, unfortunately, all the time as information comes out. What I've been telling people is that it seems to be safe. And that's the reason why New York State is allowing day camp-like settings, because it's been deemed safe enough. We're increasing in phases, 1, 2, 3. Things appear to be improving. Now, an 80-year-old grandmother is in the extreme high-risk group that even though we've been seeing less severity of the disease, they're still in that group. And I think of my own grandmothers, I would just err on the side of caution. What seems to me to be the most practical solution is definitely send your child on that bus, 40 people, go to day camp, close your eyes a little bit and hope for the best. You know, the governor is telling us it's safe. The yeshivas and day camps are running them right now, and we are choosing as communities to send for the most part. Don't mix with your 80-year-old grandmother right away. Like sort of what I answered last week. Wait a week or two, see what happens in real time in the camp. Ensure that the day camp that your child is in is a transparent camp, and you trust that they will tell you if there's a case. They're not afraid that you're going to pull your child out of camp and ask for a refund, and they're going to think of your child's safety first. That's first, to make sure you're in such an environment. Wait a little bit. You know, if there's going to be an outbreak, the thought process, it'll be in the beginning when everyone's mingling right away. If you feel like after a week or two there aren't any new cases and there aren't any outbreaks in that particular camp or on that particular bus, I would feel comfortable starting to mingle with that 80-year-old grandmother. At first, you start off. It's all about doing it slowly in a stepwise manner. Sort of the way New York State's right now opening back up. I think it's an appropriate way to sort of use that model with our own personal life. You never want to go from 0 to 60 too quickly. We've seen with other states that's when we have those outbreaks, 15, 20, 100 people being exposed at one time or getting sick. And that's when we start overwhelming the local medical facilities.
Ms. Gross, Dr. Blumenthal, I want to ask you about academics versus socialization and recreation. My child did not do so well in the last 4 months on home Zoom learning. And I would like him or her to have fun time this summer, but I really feel that unless they caught up academically and spend the next 6 or 7 weeks really catching up academically, they might have a fun summer in day camp, but they're going to fall behind when September resumes. Could you comment, Ms. Gross, on what advice do we give a parent who has this conflict on catching up academically versus providing their child with a much needed recreation, socialization, and day camp?
So I think one of the things that I've learned is that concept of catching up is really not appropriate when it comes to this crisis, because it's not a situation where your child broke their leg and they were now home and had home tutoring. Every single school was closed across the nation. Everybody was home and everybody is in the same boat. Everyone experienced distance learning, and everybody, if you want to call it behind, is now a little bit behind. And like I mentioned a little bit before, the teachers know this, and they're going to be taking this into account. Administration knows this, buildings know this. They will do what they need to do to, compensate for the time lost in the classroom. Whether hopefully this doesn't happen, whether we are on distance learning come the fall, or we're on some sort of hybrid model, or we're fully back in school, which that's my hope. The teachers are going to do what they do best, and they will fill in those gaps, and they will compensate for what was lost. I'm not a school psychologist. I'm not a child psychologist. But I would venture to say that from the educational perspective, let the child go to camp. Let them socialize. Let them have experiences to share when they do go back into the classroom, because school is a social experience. It's an emotional experience, and the academics will 100% follow. If you're really, really concerned, read a book together every night. Pick a novel and read a chapter together at night just to keep their comprehension skills up. Go on some fun math games, but do not pressure the child with academics. I think they've had enough.
Dr. Blumenthal, Ms. Gross is encouraging me as a parent to have the confidence to send my child to day camp, even though I feel they're a little bit academically behind in what happened in the last 3 months. And I liked her comment that no one is behind. But I'm an anxious parent, and school is very competitive. And I still don't want my child to be behind. So give me some reassurance that everything will be okay in September.
So I'll quote everybody's dream of whom their child will be, which is Albert Einstein, who was famous for saying that education is what's left after you've forgotten everything you've learned. So education is a process. It's a nurturing curiosity. It's mastering study skills. Like, again, I think Ms. Gross can probably comment that better than I can. And certainly, if I have a choice between a child who is emotionally distraught or academically behind, I'm going to put an emphasis, especially today, on the child feeling replenished and feeling content and having a healthy, wholesome self-esteem over the mastery of certain skills. As I said, so if, as was just mentioned, if we can do it in a recreational way, in a manageable way to try to catch up with the skills, we can do it sort of inadvertently, that's great. But if I have a forced choice, I'd like to have a content, happy child in September and not a tense, anxious child who is caught up.
I love that. It's about the child's feelings. It's not about my feelings as a parent. I love that. Last question to wrap up. Same question for Dr. Kirschenbaum, Dr. Blumenthal, and Ms. Gross. You each given and collectively really a lot of good comments tonight, a lot of different thoughts. And you've also overlapped in some of your recommendations. Dr. Kirschenbaum, give us your thoughts on how we can get back to a semblance of normalcy and routine this summer, because the routine that we've had in the last 4 months has not been that enjoyable when all is said and done. Get us back into a semblance of normalcy, please, Dr. Kirschenbaum.
I am trying to do that on a daily basis in my personal life right now. It's difficult and it's a struggle. It's important as parents that we validate it to ourselves that this is not easy, and to remind ourselves that our children are depending upon us to provide that for them, even if it means to fake it. We may feel an enormous amount of pressure and anxiety. Ms. Gross mentioned September. As soon as she mentioned that, I felt it right then and there. We don't know what's going to happen in September. We discussed a little bit last time, the fear of the unknown. As adults, we control almost every single variable in our children's lives. And at this very moment, we really don't, whether a camp's going to open or a camp's going to close, whether they're going to do day camps or home for weekends. It's constantly changing, and it's really not up to us. We have to be a real leader for our family. That's confidence. We have to be confident enough that our children look to us to provide the stability in order for them to thrive. And that is how you get normalcy. Whether Ms. Gross gave and Dr. Blumenthal gave some great ideas on how to weather the storm through the summer. But I do believe whether you have an activity-based day or an evening-based day regarding activities, regardless, the most important factor would be the attitude of the parents. And that's how you will capture or recapture the sense of normalcy to your daily life. If you as a parent approach it in an appropriate manner, the children will definitely feed off of that, especially since we don't know how long this is going to last for and how far into the fall this will continue.
Thank you. Dr. Blumenthal, get us back to a state of normalcy, please.
Oops. Okay, yeah. It's actually interesting that for many years when I worked in the hospital and I would dictate reports, probably the most common typo error made by clerical staff was to spell my first name Normal. So I'm maybe not the person to talk about normalcy, but I'll just two quotes, and I think that might capture what you're saying. One is the quote by the famous Vince Scully, probably the longest lasting sports announcer who now covered the Brooklyn Dodgers and Los Angeles Dodgers for many, many years. And he had a line that losing feels more bad than winning feels good. And we do have a tendency to overemphasize the negative. And as I've often mentioned to patients of mine who are going through difficult times, and now I'm speaking to all of us as we go through difficult times, that my mother, may she rest in peace, used to tell me that she survived Auschwitz by watching the sunset. And she said, if there's something that beautiful in the world, it can't all be bad. So I think some way to maintain normalcy during some of these difficult times is to watch the sunsets.
Ms. Gross, get us back to a state of normalcy, please.
I feel like, for 13 years, I've been working in public education, and this is kind of like my debut back into the world where I grew up and where my chinuch has been. And, for public educators, it's separation of church and state. We don't bring in religion. We don't bring in faith into our instruction. But us as a community, we have the luxury of the faith and the hope and the emunah that all will be okay. And I think reminding the kids that, hakol b'dei shamayim, that, God is going to get us through this the way he gets us through everything difficult in life, I think is, it's the ultimate message for the children. So I think it's hanging on to that faith and making sure that the kids know that you are confident, like Dr. Kirschenbaum said, and showing them that, no matter what, we will get through this together. That to me is how we're going to get back to normalcy, is by doing things like this and, with community and collaboration.
Getting back to normalcy, Dr. Kirschenbaum, Dr. Blumenthal, Ms. Gross, involves our children are depending on us as parents, as grandparents, to thrive. So show leadership to our children. We talk a lot about leadership in the workplace, in the world. Dr. Kirschenbaum talked about, and Dr. Blumenthal and Racheli Gross talked about showing leadership to our children, and they can thrive. And both Dr. Blumenthal and Ms. Gross talked about emphasizing the positive, just looking at the sunset every single night. That was a remarkable comment from your mother, Dr. Blumenthal, just looking at the sunset every night to get her through this. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We hope that each person took just one idea, one suggestion, one idea from the many thoughts that were given over. Just take one thought and run with it for the summertime. Dr. Kirschenbaum, Dr. Blumenthal, Ms. Gross, everyone, thank you very much. Have a wonderful, safe summer.